All right, guys, we are going to be reacting to why there are no French cars in America. Yeah, that's a good point. Why there's no French cars here in the United States. Let's jump in.
Heads on the Champs-Élysées was
Be like,
laughed
oh, be
at
like,
on
hey.
American highways. The same Peugeot that won awards in Europe couldn't even last a decade here.
Huh.
So why did the very qualities that made French cars so admired overseas collapse so spectacularly in the US? Let's find out.
Oh, look at that 90s video. Wow.
In
Ooh,
the
look at
mid-20th century, French
square car.
automakers
Wow.
crossed the
Oh.
Atlantic with big ambitions to conquer the largest car market in the world. Back home in Europe, they were giants, praised for their design, their engineering, and that unmistakable blend of art and technology that defined French cars. But in America, the story played out differently. People looked at them with suspicion. They felt foreign, out of place. The truth? We just weren't ready for what the French were selling. Take the car that in 1955 was called the most advanced car in the world, the Citroën DS. With its futuristic design and its hydropneumatic suspension that made it ride like a cloud, it was a masterpiece in Europe. Here, though, that same technology looked weird, and worse, unfixable. American mechanics, raised on the simplicity of big, burbling V8s, had no clue how to repair something so complex. And that was the end of the story. Because if a car can't be fixed, no matter how advanced it is, it's worthless. Peugeot had a little more luck, but only a little. With cars like the 403 and the 504, they carved out a small following among people who appreciated French build quality. They never tried to take on the giants from Detroit. Instead, they lived in their own niche, earning respect among enthusiasts. Even the famous TV detective Columbo drove a beat-up old Peugeot 403, which gave the brand a certain authenticity. Not a massive success, but at least not a total disaster. And then there was the Renault Dauphine. This was the spectacular
It's a
failure.
gorgeous car.
The one that did lasting damage to the reputation of French cars in America. The Dauphine was a tiny rear-engine car designed for Europe's narrow streets. But here in the US, with long distances and wide highways, it was completely out of its depth.
And this is the reason you don't see a lot of Mini Coopers in the United States. You don't see them anymore. You will see some folks driving them, very rare. You might see them. However, it's because our roads are so big that make no sense to have a small car. It makes no sense.
Rusted quickly, the engine struggled to keep up, and reliability issues became legendary. The Dauphine earned a reputation as one of the worst cars ever sold in America. And it became a warning sign. You can't walk into a market with a product that doesn't fit its needs.
Okay.
The Renault Dauphine wasn't an isolated case. The real issue for French cars in America was that their technology and design philosophy simply didn't match what drivers here wanted. In Europe, they were praised as innovative and comfortable. But in America, that same complexity, hydraulic systems, small engines, fragile electronics, translated into constant breakdowns. And while the French were building a reputation for unreliability, the Japanese were moving in with a completely different strategy. Honda, Toyota, and Datsun delivered simple cars, small but durable engines, tough transmissions, and minimal maintenance. Easy to understand, easy to repair, and instantly trustworthy. To match that level of dependability, the French would have had to completely rethink their design philosophy, and they weren't willing to do that. Then came another problem: after-sales service. A breakdown is always frustrating, but in America, it was a nightmare, because the French dealer network was tiny and scattered. That created two major obstacles. First, spare parts were hard to find, long waits, high prices. Secondly, very few mechanics knew how to work on this kind of technology. Meanwhile, the Japanese were investing in what actually mattered: strong dealership networks and well-trained technicians. Their customers had peace of mind knowing there would always be a shop nearby, a part in stock, and fast service. That small detail turned out to be decisive. And there was more. Regulations. Meeting US safety and emission standards required expensive modifications. In some cases, like the Citroën SM, the cost of adapting the car was so high that it couldn't even be sold legally. With sales already low, the math just
And
didn't
you know what's
work.
crazy? It doesn't look that bad either, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not the design. It's, it's Americans. We like to work on our cars. We like to just fix our car. We like to just buy our car and just keep working on it. We're handy. So a car like that it doesn't even give you the option to, not the option, but it might be harder to fix. It's not appealing.
This is how the answer begins to take shape. Why did the Japanese succeed while the French failed? The difference wasn't about who built the most advanced car. It was about who understood the American buyer. The Japanese played with their heads, the French with their hearts. Japan arrived with a strategy that was simple and pragmatic.
Wow.
No extravagance, no futuristic gimmicks that could break down. What they offered was efficiency, low running costs, and above all, reliability.
This is old school.
And their timing couldn't have been better. In 1973, the oil crisis hit. Overnight, filling up a V8 became a luxury, and there were the Japanese. Ready with exactly what the market wanted. Compact, economical cars with simple engineering, and no systems waiting to fail. Cars that just worked. That was the key to their success. For the French, it came down to a cultural mismatch. In Europe, reliability meant something different. A reliable car was one you could repair easily, with a wide network of workshops and affordable parts. If your Peugeot broke down, you knew a mechanic was nearby and it wouldn't cost a fortune to fix. Even with the occasional hiccup, the car was still reliable. But in the US, reliability meant something else entirely. A car that ran for years without a single issue. And with a thin dealer network and few trained technicians, every failure looked bigger than it actually was. That negative perception stuck so deeply in American culture, it was summed up in a joke from the 70s and 80s. The French make great wine, but terrible cars.
Wow.
That one-liner captured exactly what the average American thought about French automakers in those years.
That's it.
With their reputation in shambles and after several failures, you'd think the French automakers would have just walked away. But they didn't. Despite the criticism, and despite the jokes that were already circulating in the 70s and 80s, they kept trying to break into the American market. Renault gave it another shot. This time with the Renault Le Car. Basically the US version of the Renault 5. But the result? A complete disaster. In the 1980s, the Le Car had to go head-to-head with two of the toughest rivals imaginable. The Honda Civic and the Volkswagen Rabbit.
Yeah, the Honda Civic, those were selling like pancakes back in the day.
Civic and the Rabbit were seen as well-built, reliable, efficient cars. The Le Car, on the other hand, came across as flimsy, underpowered, and clearly of lower quality. And to make matters worse, for about the same price, Americans could buy a car that was far more solid and durable. And that's where the first big lesson appeared. In the US, it wasn't enough to simply ship over a European model as is. You had to adapt it and commit to quality. In 1979, they decided the best way to conquer America wasn't to go it alone, but to partner with someone local. That's when they bought a controlling stake in American Motors Corporation, or AMC, hoping to use its production and dealer network to finally sell cars in volume. The result of that alliance was the Renault Alliance, an Americanized version of the Renault 9. At first, things looked great. It was marketed as affordable and modern. It even won the prestigious Motor Trend Car of the Year award in 1983, and sales took off. For a brief moment, it finally seemed like Renault had finally cracked the code for success in America. But the honeymoon didn't last. Very soon, the same old problems came back. Electrical gremlins, fragile parts, and poor build quality. The reputation for being unreliable grew stronger.
Man.
Sales collapsed. And the final blow came in 1987, when Chrysler bought AMC. The
Oh,
deal left Renault out in the cold, and with no way forward, they had no choice but to pull out of the US market.
wow. Damn, man, that's sad. Doesn't look that bad as a
For
car.
the other French brands, the ending was just as bleak. Citroën bailed out in 1974, unable to meet expensive US regulations. Peugeot held on until 1991, but in the end, sales never reached break-even. Between the high cost of adaptation, a battered reputation, and a weak dealer network, staying in the US simply wasn't sustainable. Meanwhile, the competition was thriving. Toyota and Honda dominated the market for small, dependable cars. Volkswagen cemented itself as the affordable European alternative, and in the premium segment, BMW and Mercedes-Benz were steadily building empires. The French retreat served as a cautionary tale for the rest of the auto industry. If you want to succeed in a market as big and demanding as the US, you need more than style or advanced technology. You need a long-term strategy and massive investment. Today, Peugeot and Citroën are part of Stellantis, the fourth largest automaker in the world. And while the idea of returning to the US market comes up from time to time, it has never materialized. Why? The main reason is the enormous weight of their reputation and the massive cost of rebuilding a distribution and service network from scratch. On top of that, Stellantis itself is currently facing quality problems with brands like Jeep and Chrysler. A reminder that reliability is still one of the toughest hurdles in the American market, even when you have a giant behind you. Renault, on the other hand, played things smarter. If you can't succeed in the US, invest in someone who can. That is exactly what they did in the late 1990s when they bought a stake in Nissan.
That's smart.
And up until Nissan's more recent troubles, that move was one of the best investments the French ever made. All of this contrasts sharply with the story of the Korean automakers, Hyundai and Kia. Unlike the French, the Koreans came to America with the mindset of learning and adapting. At first, they offered
a lot
cheap...
of people don't understand this. And you know who makes this mistake? A lot of restaurants. A lot of people that bring their own food here, they don't adapt to the American palate. And that's why they go out of business. They think that simply just making pizza the way they do in Italy is going to sell here in the United States. No, it's not going to sell here. You have to learn how to make American pizza or adapt to the American palate. Otherwise, it's not going to work. It's the same with the cars. You cannot, BMW cannot build cars for American like they do in Germany or in Europe. They can't. So they have to adapt.
budget-friendly cars. But over time, they invested heavily in improving quality and technology. Today, not only do they compete strongly in sales, but their luxury division now goes head-to-head with the Germans. The key to their success is perception. Their high-end models are seen as more reliable and offering better value for money than their German rivals.
And you have a BMW,
something the French never managed to achieve. In the end, this isn't just a story about cars. It's a story of ambition, pride, and above all, a cultural clash. Because in America, success wasn't about who built the most advanced car. It was about who truly understood their customer. Maybe the French didn't exactly fail in the US. Maybe, just maybe, they never really took it seriously.
Oh, good point there. There you go. There you have it. I would say, study the American. I would say create cars that are just similar to the Germans. Maybe you can go that route or do something very, I would say, affordability. Right now, what is most important for Americans is affordability. If you can make something affordable, you might just enter the market. That's my opinion. Let me know what you guys think, guys. I would love to hear you guys' opinions. I will see you next one.